Hi, my name's Andrew Rains. I'm a wine educator and a member of the team at Okanagan Crushpad Winery, and I'm going to take you through a virtual tasting today of 4 beautiful wines from the Narrative brand. Now, Okanagan Crushpad is a state-of-the-art winemaking facility in Summerland, British Columbia that focuses very much on sustainable agriculture, regenerative farming, and low intervention winemaking, which really allows the wines that they make to really represent the terroir of the Okanagan and have a real sense of the place. So rather than just taking you through the 4 tasting notes of the different wines, we're really going to focus today on how to taste wine like a wine pro. Wine is one of those beautiful things where the more you understand about tasting wine, the more pleasure you get out of drinking wine. And there's 5 different aspects of wine tasting. There's sight, there's swirl, there's sniff, there's sip, and there's savor. And we're going to go through the 5 S's with each of the wines. And the 4 wines that we've picked for you today is the Narrative Sparkling Wine, the Narrative XC. We then got the Narrative White Viognier. We've got a Rosé wine, which is a Viognier Syrah. And then we've got a red wine where we switch it out and it's a Syrah Viognier. So we're going to go through all 4 different wines, focus on the tasting and how to properly taste them. So without further ado, why don't we focus on the Narrative XC? There is no better place to start a wine tasting than with some sparkling wine. So what we have here is a Narrative XC method. It's made from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir grapes, which are the grapes that you're going to find in Champagne. And this wine is made in Okanagan Crushpad's state-of-the-art Charmat method tanks, the exact same way that Prosecco would be made. So as I mentioned before, wine tasting can be very, very simple. You pour yourself some wine, you sip the wine, and then you just decide if you want another sip, another glass, maybe you want to order a case. But the more we focus on how to taste wine, the 5 S's of wine, the more understanding we get, and then the more enjoyment we get out of the wine as well. So we're going to focus on, with this wine, just the sight, the way the wine looks. And in all honesty, the way the wine looks is probably the least important of the 5 S's, but we know that we eat with our eyes and we also drink with our eyes. We do get enjoyment from the way a wine looks. And sparkling wine's a perfect example of that, which is quite often why we drink out of a champagne flute. We can see the bubbles rising and we can get a little bit of an indication of the color of the wine, which can even give us some clues as to what to expect from the wine. So a white wine will actually gain color as it ages. A red wine might lose color as it ages, so we can even get some clues. So when it comes to evaluating the way a wine looks, the best thing to do is to have a white background, tilt the glass away from you, and that'll give you an idea of the color of the wine. So for this one, we can see straight away it's a rosé. We can see that it has some nice carbonation on there. So we know it's going to have carbonated texture, which is called a mousse in sparkling wine. So from there, we're going to bring the wine to our nose and we're going to sniff. Now, if you're paying attention, you notice that I didn't swirl the wine. And that's because with sparkling wine, it's actually not that important to swirl the wine because the carbonation, the lifting of the bubbles, will actually lift some of the aromatics up to the surface of the glass, so you don't need to swirl it. But when it comes to just sniffing the wine, basically we just want to bring it to our nose and then start to think about some of the aromas that we get. So for me, straight away, I'm getting some red fruit, I'm getting some nice toastiness, and all you really need to think about is, am I getting fruit? Am I getting some floral notes? Maybe some minerality. And again, to me, this is some really nice red cherry, some toasty notes, which you get in sparkling wine for sure. So we've sniffed the wine, we didn't swirl the wine, now we're gonna sip the wine. So all you need to do right now is bring the wine up, take a sip, and then bring a little bit of oxygen in with your sip, and you're going to be able to hear it on the camera when I sip this wine. So it seems rude, but what you're doing is you're bringing the oxygen in there, which is going to lift the aromatics. So we've sipped the wine, and now all we have to do is savor the wine. Think about the wine. Do we like the way it tastes? Do we want to continue drinking it? Does it seem balanced? And we'll focus on these concepts a little bit more with the other wines, but what we wanted to focus on with this wine was the way that it looked and some of the clues that we can get from it. It's a rosé, we know it's carbonated, and it's a fantastic sparkling wine and a really great place to start the tasting. So after this, we're going to move on to the Narrative Viognier, and we're going to really focus then on how to smell the wine. So let's move on to the first white wine in the pack, which is the Narrative 2018 Viognier. Now, Viognier is a fantastic varietal, grows really, really well in the Okanagan, and this wine is actually fermented in Okanagan Crushpad's concrete tanks, so it sees no oak treatment whatsoever. So we'll go through the 5 S's of the wine very quickly. We'll just look at the sight of the wine. We're going to notice straight away it's a white wine. It's got kind of a medium lemon hue, which is what we would expect as it's a relatively young wine. We can give it a bit of a swirl as well. Now, a lot of people think that the tiers or the legs of the wine that appears on the glass is an indication of quality, which isn't actually true. It's a bit of a myth. It really just represents the surface tension of the wine and not necessarily quality. But it is kind of nice to have a look at the tiers. It really just kind of gives you an idea of the viscosity, which sometimes comes from the alcohol, but it's a very, very kind of complicated subject and not always an indication of quality. But the big thing we want to focus on with this wine is the sniff aspect and the swirl aspect of this wine. So to really get the aromatics from the wine, we want to swirl it. Now, this is something that can be very intimidating to people when they first start entering into wine tasting. We're afraid that we're going to splash ourselves or possibly splash somebody else. So the easiest way to swirl the wine is to use a table as a bit of an anchor, give it a good quality swirl, nice and simple like that. Now, if we're brave, we can actually swirl it in the air. Now, this is where we want to focus on how to hold the wine glass, and I always like to drink my wine out of a wine glass that has a stem. The problem with stemless wine glasses, when you grip the wine by the bowl, is the heat from your hand will actually warm the wine up, which is something that we don't want to do with white wine. So it's always nice to have a stem to hold on to. Personally, I like to grip the base of the stem. It gives it a nice solid grip, and then I can swirl the wine freely, which really brings oxygen into the wine and lifts those aromatics. Now, Viognier is a very aromatic grape varietal, and we can tell that by really focusing on where we can start to smell the aromatics, the nose or the bouquet of the wine. If you can smell it from your chest, it's going to be very pronounced aromatics, and I can already start getting some of those floral and tropical notes from the wine. If I bring it to my chin, they become even more pronounced, and then when I give it a good sniff, there we go. It's like a bouquet exploding out of the glass of flowers and tropical fruits. So we give it a swirl, we give it a sniff, we get some floral notes, we get some tropical fruit notes, maybe a little bit of minerality as well. So then we move on to the sipping and savoring aspect. And there's all types of things to think about when we drink wine: the sweetness, the acidity, the alcohol, and the body. And the body is what I really want to focus on with this wine. So when it comes to body, the body is almost a perception of heaviness that the wine has. And the best way to think about this is wine will be either light-bodied, medium-bodied, or full-bodied. Light-bodied will be like 1% milk. Medium-bodied will be like whole milk. And full-bodied will be like heavy cream. So if we give the wine a swirl, give it another sip, take a sip of the wine, and then we just think about the heaviness. This has got some fantastic body to it. It's quite heavy. The weight just kind of sits in there and coats the palate beautifully, which we would expect from Viognier, particularly from a Viognier that has been fermented in concrete. So this makes it very, very good for pairing with kind of heavier dishes, right? This would go quite well with seafood, and this would even stand up to kind of a cream sauce. So it's a beautiful wine, very, very food friendly, lots of floral aromatics, tropical fruits on the nose, which come through on the flavor. It's full bodied and just a beautifully made wine. So from there, we're going to move on to the rosé, which is going to be a Viognier with some Syrah in there as well. And it's a beautiful wine that we can really focus on some of the other aspects of wine tasting. All right, let's move on to the rosé in the pack. Now, this is a wine I'm very, very excited about because I haven't tried it myself. We've just released this wine and it's very, very unique. So it's very, very rare to have a wine that has white wine and red wine in it. It's a kind of an uncommon thing to happen, but one of the places that does it really well is one of my favorite wine regions in the world, which is the Northern Rhone. So quite often with their red wines, they'll add a little bit of white wine, a Viognier, which is what we tasted previously, into the blend, and quite often even co-ferment them together. So this is a bit of a twist on that Northern Rhone tradition, where this is 80% Viognier and 20% Syrah co-fermented together in stainless steel. So I'm going to be opening it for the first time as well, and I'm incredibly excited for that. So the first thing you're going to notice is that it comes in a screw cap, which is actually called a Stelvin. Now, the good thing with screw cap is it's easy to open up, and it's just as good as a cork, but without any issues that can come from using a cork, such as cork taint, which is coming from something called TCA, which is a bacteria that actually affects a lot of wines. So it's a much safer enclosure, and you'll see a lot of innovative wineries like Okanagan Crush Pad really going more toward the Stelvin or the screw cap, which is a fantastic thing. It was really pioneered by New Zealand and Australia, and yeah, definitely a sign of an innovative winery. So we'll go through the 5 S's together, and again, this is my first time trying the wine. So the first thing we're going to see is that, yeah, I mean, it is a rosé. Now this is quite dark for a rosé. Quite often, the color and the amount of kind of darkness to a rosé will come from the amount of skin contact. So a lighter style rosé will have minimal skin contact, maybe as little as 12 hours. A darker rosé will have a little bit more. But this one, definitely a darker rosé. And I've been telling people for a very long time, you should be drinking rosé year round. And this specifically is going to be a rosé that is fantastic for any season. So we won't focus too much on the color because I'm just dying to kind of get my nose in this and have a sip of this as well. So we've looked at the wine. We're going to give it a good quality swirl there. Grab it by the base, give it a good swirl, bring it to our nose. And yeah, I mean, that smells beautiful. So we're getting elements of both of the wines. So we're getting the floral aromatics coming from the Viognier. We're getting some tropical fruits, but we're also getting a bit of black pepper, which is very, very common with Syrah. So almost a bit kind of like salami, cured meat, black pepper in there, which pair beautifully together. Yeah, so definitely some red juicy fruit, kind of some red cherry, some floral aromatics. We can see if we can get it from the chest. A little bit more at the chin, and then certainly quite aromatic from there. So we'll take a sip of the wine together, and we're just going to go through again the sweetness. Does it have any sweetness? What's the acidity like? Where's the alcohol at? Do we get a burning sensation in the back of our throat, which is an indication of a high alcohol wine? And then we'll think about the body. So we'll give it a swirl, we'll give it a sniff, and we'll give it a sip and bring in some oxygen. So that's a beautiful wine. That does not disappoint whatsoever. So it's certainly very, very dry. There's no residual sugar. It's got some nice acidity on there. So if I lean my head forward, I get a little bit of saliva building kind of on the cheeks of my mouth. The alcohol is about medium, so I'm getting just a touch of the alcohol at the back of the throat, but certainly not a burning sensation, which you would get from a wine that has too much alcohol or is out of balance. And the body is very nice. It's got great texture on there, kind of real silky smooth texture, and a real long finish. So I can really feel that the flavors are evolving in my mouth. I can still feel it 15 to 20 seconds later, which is certainly an indication of a good wine. So yeah, this is a fantastic wine. This is the Narrative Viognier Syrah, a fantastic little blend of a wine, and this would be very, very food friendly. This would go with all types of different cheeses. This is big enough to stand up even to red meat, which is very, very rare with a rosé wine. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this wine as much as I do, because I think this is unique. This is fantastic and a good example of an innovative wine coming from Okanagan Crush Pad. So we're going to move on to the red wine, which we're going to reverse. It's going to be 80% Syrah and then 20% Viognier. So the same varietals reversed, and it'll be an entirely different wine. Okay, so the final wine in our pack is the red wine, which is the 2018 Narrative Syrah Viognier. So as I mentioned, the Northern Rhone is one of the most prestigious wine regions in the world, and is traditionally Syrah that has been co-fermented with Viognier, right? It's rare to have red wine and white wine co-fermented together, but these two varietals work extremely well together, and that's what we've got with this wine here. So it's 80% Syrah and 20% Viognier, and it's coming from Osoyoos in the South Okanagan. So a portion of the Syrah and the Viognier have been co-fermented together in clay amphora. They spent 9 months on skin, which gives it that beautiful kind of color and texture to it. And then some additional Syrah was actually fermented in concrete tanks and then further aged in clay amphora. And that's something that Okanagan Crush Pad loves to play around with, is the concrete and the clay amphora as fermentation and aging vessels. Ironically, you'll see a lot more innovative wineries using those types of fermentation vessels. And the funny thing is clay amphora is something that has been used for thousands of years, but it's just starting to become popular again because it really, really adds some nice texture to the wines. So that's what we've got with this 80% Syrah, 20% Viognier. So we'll give the wine a bit of a swirl, bring it to our nose. And yeah, straight away it is representing both the Syrah and the Viognier. You're getting some of that cured meat, almost bacon fat, black peppery notes that you would get from Syrah, and then you're getting some of those floral aromatics being lifted from the Viognier. So beautiful bouquet, beautiful nose on this wine. We'll give it another swirl, and then we'll give it a sip, and we'll give it a savor. And one of the things I really want you to think about while you taste this wines are the tannins of the wines. So that's a fantastic tasting wine. Really, really rich on the palate, really silky, smooth body on there, nice full-bodied wine. And yeah, because this is a red wine, we can focus on the tannins a little bit. So tannins are the sensations that you get when you get that kind of drying sensation behind your lips. So black tea, if you have that, if you peel off a grape skin and kind of rub that in your gums, that's the tannin, and it is coming from the grape skins, can come from the stems, can come from the pits as well, but it really provides the structure of a red wine. So, you know, poor quality red wine, the tannins will be very coarse and grippy. These tannins are silky smooth and provide fantastic structure to this wine. So we're definitely still getting some of those same flavors that we get with the aromatics that you get from Syrah, that nice kind of red fruit notes, some of that cured meat notes, the black pepper. And that's paired beautifully with some of the floral notes that we get from the Viognier, which really softens the Syrah and Viognier blend and makes an absolutely beautiful wine. And another thing to think about is the finish of the wine, the length of the wine. I can still taste the wine in my mouth, and it's been probably about 30 seconds since I've had the wine. So again, that's a good indication of the quality of the wine. It's balanced, it's complex, it's interesting, and it's got a long, beautiful finish as well. Thank you for joining us on this virtual tasting. I hope you liked the wines as much as I did, and maybe even learned a thing or two about how to taste wine like a pro. So for more information about the wines or about the winery, please visit OkanaganCrushpad.com, and we hope to see you at the winery soon. Cheers. Okay, there is no better place to start a wine tasting than with some
Perfect.
And this one is made in Okanagan Crushpad's state-of-the-art Charmat method. So what we have here is the Narrative XC method sparkling wine. Sorry. So we'll get straight into it. So again, we'll start with the first S, which is the site. Take a look at the wine. The white paper's not there. Move on to the first white.
Quiet.
What? Move on to the first white wine.